What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the You Know Ball podcast. I am your host, Trill Brodude, and today I'm excited to have on from UPROXX, Basketball News, and Liberty Ballers, Jackson Frank. What's going on, Jackson?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing well, dude. So we have arrived into the James Harden era officially. The Sixers have a star perimeter creator for the first time in 20 years, basically. Like it doesn't feel real to me having watched that game last night. I still am trying to process what that was. As we were joking before the podcast, I said, usually I watch other teams and I go, what is that? How are they allowed to get away with that? What's happening? And now the Sixers are that team. So first off, just up top, what was the major takeaway from James Harden's first game as a Sixer?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's tough. I mean, I had so many things swirling in my brain, putting notes down during the game. But I think the major takeaway was just the passing, right? I think, obviously Harden got his. He hit 4 step-back threes. He scored 27 on 12 shots. But the passing, the quick decision-making, even when shots didn't go down, just his ability to make stuff happen. I think there was one play in the second half where they ran it might have been the only time they did it, but they ran Harden off an Iverson cut. And two came to him, and he threw a pass to Maxey, who had an easy driving lane, and kicked it to maybe Shake for a 3. Shake airballed it, unfortunately.
Yeah, that corner 3.
Yeah, but that sort of that's not a pass that people are making to Maxey. It happens at times that Maxey gets downhill. They ran that stuff all the time with Ben to get him downhill. But to make that pass off of 2 defenders, another one that we were talking about before we started recording here, that Furkan just kind of mindlessly cut to the rim from the corner in the first half, and Harden lofted it from about the coach's box over the top, and Furkan drew a foul, got to the line. That stuff doesn't happen either. So I can rewatch that game and probably find 10 to 15 passes where it's a good shot directly came because Harden is a brilliant passer and a very quick passer too. He's methodical as a scorer, but when he sees a pass that he thinks can be exploited for an opportunity, he makes it. And so that was the biggest thing. It's just I've talked about it at length. I don't think the Sixers' biggest issue the last couple of years, especially since they upgraded the shooting, was floor space, and it was passing. They're a really bad passing team outside of Joel. When your best passer, positionally or impactfully, is your center, who also averages 29 points a game, 30 points a game, whatever he's at, and also is asked to anchor the defense, you're probably not in a great spot unless you're Nikola Jokic.
Right.
And Jokic is a lesser defender, so
he's a point guard.
Yeah, not to take anything away. He's an improved defender. Don't want to. Yeah. Everyone knows me. I'm a big Jokic supporter. So, but point being is that was kind of their only plus passer in maybe Niang at times, maybe Danny Green in situations. Danny's a pretty good skip passer moving the ball. But point being is the passing was their biggest thing offensive that limited them. Skip pass to the corner. Times when teams they front Joel and they throw a backside shader. I don't know if that's a shader, I don't know if that's a term, but a guy shading the backside. No one to get that skip pass to the corner. Was a big issue. Now they have someone who can do that. They have a guy in Harden who can basically make not about every pass, but a lot of the passes they need to, and can play really well off of the gravity that Joel commands. So just the 20 to 30 passes that Harden made last night that no one else has made on this team for, a long time. Jimmy was a good passer when he was here, but it's a different level. Obviously everyone knows that, but I think as we talked about, also just in general, Jimmy was really good when he was a Sixer, not taking anything away from it, but he also wasn't. It's probably his least good year since he became an All-Star, maybe
for sure,
which is more a testament to him. It's not taking, but also didn't make the All-Star team, and it wasn't unwarranted. That year was good in the playoffs.
It was a weird year.
Yeah, he clearly didn't love being here, which is fine. You play where you want to play. It's not a criticism, but yeah, just the fact that they have an actual all-star guard who is better on offense than defense, which is not a shot at Ben, but Ben is a great defender and not a great offensive player. So yeah, just that general presence really stood out to me, and it was headlined by the passing and all the things he could do from that perspective that nobody else has been able to do for. You've followed the Sixers longer than I have. I've covered them for half a decade.
I can't remember a time when we've had the scoring and passing combination like Harden. He immediately was doing things that I've never seen a Sixer do, even though this isn't MVP 2017 James Harden.
Yeah.
This is an even compromised version of that Harden, and it still is automatically from a scoring. Even Joel said after the game, Joel was you should have seen my face.
Awesome.
like early in the game, I literally got the impression that like they kind of stumbled out of the gate a little bit.
Yeah.
Joel was playing kind of like all over the place. He fumbled the ball a few times, and I was like, I literally don't think that he knew what to expect. And it wasn't like Harden was making his imprint on the game immediately. It was just kind of like everyone getting used to everything. Like the first quarter did not go that great.
They just hit threes, honestly. I tweeted something and someone asked like how they look, and I was like, solid. Like Harden's helping, but hitting. I think they were like 5 of 7 from 3 or 5 of 8 to open the first quarter. But yeah, I agree. I mean, it was weird. Harden was kind of deferential, but you could clearly see that they figured things out pretty quickly. Harden found his rhythm, especially. I think. I mean that 2-minute segment where Joel didn't close the half, Harden that kind of unlocked things. They went on a 12-1 run. Harden kind of found his stride as a scorer and passer, and then carried it over to the second half. And he and Joel just kind of went from there. But yeah, I agree that that first stint it was hard not to be optimistic because it was like they have no idea what they're doing really, but it's working. Like Joel's never played with someone like that, and I mean he continued throughout the game where like Joel and a lot of other guys too like have never played with a passer like that. Like I think back to the play in the second half where like Joel was running down the middle of the floor on a fast break and Harden threw him a nice pass and he kind of like bobbled it and then scored eventually. But like you can tell that's like never a pass that he's gotten before. He's usually just accustomed to creating a deep seal against a mismatch and scoring probably scoring in that situation, but never like the diving role. So kind of catching it on the move. So yeah, I agree that the first quarter was good, but you could just tell that like they still were very much getting in. Okay, and they're still figuring out. There's going to be. I mean, I'm sure we're going to find actions and sets and whatnot offensively that kind of cater more to Harden. As the game goes on, maybe not so much during the Joel minutes because Joel is rightfully kind of the centerpiece of the offense. We talk about Harden, but Joel had 34 points on like 80% true shooting like that, like 18 shots. So and
it didn't even feel like a good Joel game to me offensively. I felt like defensively because actually one thing, just speaking on the defense, just generally speaking, Tobias being able to take the cat assignment definitely made things easier on Joel defensively. He was able to hang out near the rim more often, like because of Cat's shortcomings as a defender, having a guy like Jared Vanderbilt out there or McDaniels, whoever, to kind of protect the rim, not being a huge shooting threat, especially Jared Vanderbilt. It allowed Embiid to kind of park himself near the rim so that he could be a help side defender. Like he was definitely like, it just felt like he had more like, and one of the things I've talked about getting Harden and having him like carry the load for times is allowing Joel, like just someone joked about it last night after the game, but like that was the first post-game interview this season where Joel wasn't drenched in sweat and like, oh my God, I literally just carried the team for 35 of those 48 minutes or 40 minutes, however long, so we could win the game. And that's like, those are like the little things that will open up so much because like, even if like I spent weeks trying to be like, what is this going to look like? Like, and of course I get in my own head as a Sixers fan and just being like, oh, this is going to go wrong and that's going to go wrong and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, I've always felt confident about this pairing just because of the fact that maybe it's not that hand in glove fit as like Harden's used to playing with a more, pick and roll heavy guy, a vertical spacer like Clint Capella or Nicholas Claxton, or he's used to playing with like a pure spacing big that when they did the small ball year in Houston and blah, 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 blah. But ultimately the talent will figure itself out. Like Steve Jones tweeted a ton of clips today and he was like, look, Joel's can roll. Like he's just never had to roll before. Like he's not going to be catching lobs all the time. And like you said, there was that one awkward play where like Harden is used to throwing it towards the rim and having a guy who can just like slam it in. And that's not part of Joel's game yet. And like, ideally is not going to be part of his game, but it's something that once they get more into a rhythm, he's just getting so easily downhill and into the paint to create those open looks that like, it feels like to me, there's no way that it can't work like those two together. It's just, there's too much talent.
Yeah, I know. And I wrote about their fit right after the draft, not the trade, not the draft. If anyone wants to read it, it's over at UPROXX. Just search my name, James Harden, Joel Embiid, UPROXX. You'll find it. I don't remember the name of the title, but I talked about some of the potential hurdles with this, like between Joel being a post-up guy and Harden like a rim runner at the top. But I came to the same conclusion. I was like, at the end of the day, these are two guys that like draw doubles off of ball screens, draw doubles when they're in their preferred areas of the floor, and they've never had that for each other. Like Dwight Howard's really good when he was with Harden, but wasn't as good as Joel. He was past his peak, right? He was an all NBA type guy, not an MVP, which is a pretty big difference. Not that, again, I'm not diminishing Dwight, but that's a big difference there. And also wasn't really a self creator. I mean, he was good, and he was pretty good in the post, some face up stuff in Orlando, but was never the self creator that Joel is. So they've never played with a player like each other. And so and as you mentioned, like there was that. I think that was the first play of the second half, maybe early in the second half, where like it looked like Harden wanted Joel to finish a lob, but he just over the top, and I think D'Lo was the tagger or whatever, and he just scored easily after he caught it. But it was like, if that's Clint Capella or Nicholas Claxton, that's a dunk. But it's not to discredit Joel. He's not a very explosive vertical guy. It's fine. I mean, he's incredible. He might win MVP, but that's not his game. And so you could definitely tell there were some growing pains. But at the end of the day, you put these guys in favorable positions. There was another play, I think it might have been in the first half, where like they ran a pick and roll, and the two guys went with Joel in the roll and Harden an easy floater, like that sort of thing, like in rhythm. Like there are just easy plays like that where it's like, oh yeah, maybe they're not great. Maybe Joel isn't the best roller, but also no one's going to leave him alone, right? It's not Matisse or like someone like that rolling. So
exactly.
I think Joel's biggest issue as a roller is like he doesn't have great balance. Like he's gotten better in terms of balance this year and even last year. But there's a play in the first half, I think, maybe the second half, but where he kind of stumbled on a roll or whatever and kind of missed the shot at the rim, maybe threw it too hard. So you can definitely see some issues. But like, yeah, I definitely agree with you and Steve that like he's never been like, he's not a great roller, but also he's improved the last couple of years, and that mid-range jumper that he has on lock is a really big key there, right? He can pop. He's really, really good at attacking off the catch now. So I'm curious to kind of see if they run more pick and pop stuff rather than pick and, I don't know, camp out. I don't know exactly what you want to call what Joel does on the roll there.
Yeah. Pick and walk. I don't even really know what I guess walking would be like a bad term, but it's not like, it isn't really like a it's not like a roll is not the right term, because Joel is just not like a roll. Is like a smooth, fluid action. You get downhill, you do whatever, you jump up or you grab it, you do whatever. Joel will get there hopefully with time, but it's more like a pick and stroll.
There we go. We came with it on the fly, pick and stroll. But yeah, exactly. But that's sort of like you saw with Maxey, like their combination, connection improved over the year because Joel was such a good, mid-range guy. So yeah, I don't think like, I mean, I think anyone who was tuned in with the Sixers wasn't very skeptical. But as you said earlier, I think maybe you said before we record, like I think a lot of people just kind of overthought it, and it's just one game. Like I think it's also important to like note that the Wolves are on a back-to-back. They just played a really tough game against the Grizzlies the day before. So, I'm really looking forward to that game against the Heat next Saturday. Obviously, the games before it matter too, but they play the Knicks a couple of times, and then I don't know if they have a game before that, but I have a back-to-back before that Saturday. They play the Knicks Sunday and then Wednesday. But
they have home and away.
Yeah, that home and home series, whatever they're doing a little more this year. Last year, but yeah, obviously these games matter before it, and you don't want to take too much away, but yeah, it's hard not to be encouraged, and I think the fit was pretty awesome, and you saw kind of how good the offense can look when you put one of those guys out there all the times. I think the only time they didn't play was that little 3-minute stint in the end of the third, and I'm curious to kind of see what that looks like in a close game. I think my perspective was that Doc just didn't play the starters because they were up 25 or whatever, and maybe thought they could just kind of hold the lead and coast the rest of the way. But
yeah, I was fine with that. Honestly, I know people were freaking out and stuff, but like Doc took a timeout when they cut it from like 27 to 20. And I was like, progress. Like he didn't let it get down to like 13. Like I'll take what I can get. And also like, I'm very much like and I'm trying to figure out whether like Doc has figured it out or Doc has the right guys that allows him to. Whereas Like building a lineup around James Harden is a lot easier than without Joel on the court is a lot easier than building a lineup around Maxey or Curry. They are the floor raising talents that can just make a lineup work based on their pure scoring gravity and just ability to handle the ball and do what they need to do offensively. And one of the things that I've given Doc a little bit of the benefit of the doubt is like, Ben couldn't work with traditional centers. Ben didn't work with a lot of the guys that we were able to afford because the majority of guys that we were getting on contracts weren't going to be like everyone wanted to, we just need a backup stretch five who protects the rim. And I'm like, Miles Turner? Like, I don't like, who are we going to get that is that on the minimum?
Five that stretches the floor and protects the rim. They're not a backup five at that point.
Yeah, you're like, that's a sub all-star.
Yeah.
I don't know how you find that guy. Like, those guys get paid. What was that?
I said it's Mike Muscala this year and a bunch of all-stars.
Yeah, exactly.
Players who start. So
yeah. So it was always one of those things with Doc where I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt when it came to like lineup construction with the backups and stuff. One of the things that people have given him a lot of shit for this year is having Maxey, not carry the backup units by himself as much and with Joel. But like something that we talked about before we got on the air is like, you need to get your best players playing together as much as possible, especially for this stretch. Like we're going to see a lot of Harden running lineups. We're going to see a lot of Embiid running lineups. That's how it should be because those two are just amazing talents and they're able to do that. But when it was Maxey earlier in the season, he's in his second year. He's not this amazing pick and roll creator. He's still kind of getting used to being, the guy here. And I think, like you said, transitioning him into that role, making sure that he's good playing with Joel, because when we get to the playoffs, those guys are going to have to play 40 minutes together or else the Sixers don't really have a chance. So I have given Doc the benefit of the doubt, but it seems like the margin for error with the lineups, especially the ones that he chose last night, is much wider when he's able to put one of Harden or one of Embiid on the floor. And then like maybe you can get away with the all bench lineups for like a 2 or 3 minute stretch when those guys like you're pulling away and those guys look like they need rest.
Yeah, I mean, I agree about that bench thing. Like, I really didn't make a note of it because I was just like, I saw people talking about it, but I was like, they're up 25. Like maybe Doc is just trying to give his starters like the last 15 minutes off. Like, so I'll monitor it once they play a close game with this new era. But for now, yeah, it didn't bother me. And I think the other thing about Maxey, like, and I think we probably agree that like I've been very critical of Doc for not having Maxey on the floor at all times without Joel before the trade. But I also understand it. Like I get why it happens because he's a second-year player, and Doc has a tendency to not trust guys. That's not to absolve Doc of that decision, but as we were saying before,
don't yell at us.
you'll go mad if you don't try to understand why Doc does the things he does at times. And so, just trying to kind of get a better perspective and understand why things happen. I think it makes more sense. Doesn't mean I'm not gonna. Doesn't mean I won't criticize Doc's lineups. I will talk about them all the time. But I also will try to understand why he makes the decisions he does. And I think that kind of alleviates some issues. I can't remember who I was talking with. Maybe it was on a podcast last year, but just kind of talking about the idea that coaches prefer comfort, and Tobias gives Doc more comfort because he's coached him before, and he knows maybe there's a little less variance. I mean, that doesn't make things easier, or better. But I get why Tobias has been the guy he goes to there instead of Maxey. Not that I'm defending it, but just trying to understand things and explain how I see things so people don't.
Right, of course. You said this the other day on Twitter when we were talking about your fifth starter article, which I thought was really good. And one of the things that people kept bringing up was the idea of moving Tobias to the bench. And you were like, this is never going to happen. Yeah. Am I really going to waste my time writing an article, writing 500 to 1,000 words, however long your article is, on Tobias Harris going max player, going to a player who Doc has trusted once again, a guy who he has known for a while and is, even with his flaws, is a good NBA player. Mm-hmm. You think he's just going to send him to the bench and be like, we got to start. Like, it's like, as much as like I would like to see kind of things like that in a vacuum. Yeah. The reality is it's never going to happen.
Yeah. You're trying like, I get it with fans. I even I reply to people I understand the frustration with Tobias and how he doesn't fit well with Joel, but I am here to balance everything, right? I can't talk about Tobias being benched over a guy like Matisse, who was a worse player and also has not been in the starting lineup, consistently beyond the last 2.5 months, right? Basically entered the starting lineup when they played the Warriors and won, and that's about it. So yeah, I get it, but it definitely frustrated me that people were like, "Oh, just bench Tobias." Oh, there's your answer. You just wasted 1,300 words writing about this, and I was like, "No, that's not how the NBA works." And even if you want independent of players and whatnot, I don't ever want to view players and things like this. But at the end of the day, you can't bench Tobias even if because there's also an element of maybe you want to trade him this summer.
Right.
So there are just so many things there that come into play. And I get everyone who knows me knows I've been critical of Tobias basically since I don't know, game 10 of his tenure, because he hasn't been, for the most part, not that good. I've also given him credit when he deserves it. He's played better at times over the last month and a half, and he was good last year. But yeah, it's just there's no point in talking about that sort of thing because it's not going to happen. And so it makes more sense to talk about the idea of putting Danny Green or George Niang in the starting lineup in place of Matisse, because Matisse has only been a starter for half the year and has his clear flaws. And I even noted that I wouldn't start Danny Green because I don't think Danny Green is capable of handling that level of workload these days. And quite frankly, Danny hasn't been very good for about 2 months or so.
I know.
And he was good for a little. He was pretty good for a little stretch on both ends, but and he did hit a couple threes last night. I mean, that's not that it doesn't resolve everything, of course, but yeah, it's I was surprised. I was kind of surprised to see the numbers that I included. That article was they were at a net rating of -12 when Matisse starts. You put Danny in there, and it's a +10 net rating for the team, and about the same number of possessions. So that was kind of surprising. I get it to an extent because Danny is a better off-ball player and whatnot offensively, but the defense has not been there. He's so slow laterally. It's a bummer. I thought Danny was.
I know we saw it last night. Anthony Edwards cooked him on a few plays where I was just that idea in theory of starting Danny was always good if you were to have someone that was a more capable ball stop. I mean, just a capable defensive stopper, it could work last year with Ben defensively. It just. But I keep having, anytime I think about Danny being that fifth starter, I just keep having flashbacks to game 1, the first half, and he's getting roasted on every single possession by Trey. The defense goes into rotation. Joel's trying to make 3 decisions at once. Yeah. Tobias is not good on one of the things about Tobias, and we'll talk a little bit just about Tobias's awkward fit in general. But one of the things that Tobias has whiffed on a lot is help defense in the past.
Yeah.
And he's shown some flashes, even recently, played good defense on Darius Garland a few weeks ago, played good defense on Cat last night. We know if you can get Tobias on a good matchup for him, the Celtics tend to fucking roast him every time we play him. He can't keep up with the Jays. He's just not that guy with them. But with a bigger guy, and sometimes he can operate a little bit better in space as long as they're not incredibly shifty and insane athletes that can just beat you off the dribble. So just kind of talking about the idea of Danny in theory is we want the old version of Danny.
Even last year, honestly, even last year's version of Danny is a perfect fifth starter. I mean, he shoots threes, he gets them up in volume, but yeah, he just physically can't do things, and that's part of the issue is he I don't know what he's shooting from three this year. I think it's fine, probably about league average, maybe a little higher, but he just can't do things. It sounds simplistic, but he just does not have the physical ability to handle or generate himself to get open shots. I mean, a lot of his threes come in transition these days. Most of them are based he's passed up threes too. I was catching a couple of games I watched. I was in Philly for a few days, and I just watched the Thunder game with some friends, and so I was catching up on yesterday to actually rewatch and get notes on it. And he passed up threes. He got cooked by Lou Dort a few times, and that's just that doesn't happen last year, Danny. It's again obviously 2016 Danny, whatever version you want. 2014, the year he went off in the finals. We'll call it his prime if you want. Apologies for anyone who was a Danny Green apologist and said that's not his prime. Whatever. Feel free.
Day before pissed.
Yeah, feel free to tell me when Danny was really peaking if it wasn't that final series. But even last year, the version is a great fifth starter, and it just is so. I think back to that. Do you remember the game against the Bulls when DeMar went off maybe 3 weeks ago, and Danny drove and he was in slow, like you couldn't tell if he was just like tempering what to do or if he was just that slow. I'm pretty sure he's just that slow, and he got the shit swat. Pardon my language, but he got the shit swat out of him by Javonte Green, I think, and it was like, and I remember like some people were watching it because it was like a Sunday game in the morning. There was nothing else on for NBA fans. And like, oh, like what happened to Dan? I was like, I literally just think that's about as fast as you can go. I've watched him all year, and so that sort of thing, you just can't make stuff happen. It sounds reductionist, but he just is so slow, and he's really declined. He had a lot of injuries too in Philly. Yeah, I don't know if he had anything before that, but he's had a few things this year as well. The hamstring keeps bothering him. Unfortunately, a lot of soft.
He's just like 33 now. Like, I mean, He was good for, up through, I think he's 33 or 34 now. Like this is when guys tend to age out. And like, I think Danny will be a fine bench wing for what we need, which is a guy who can come off the bench and shoot threes and, help defense and do the Danny Green things that he does. But at this point, I mean, we even I felt like we started to see it trending in that direction a little bit during the season last year. And I always felt like if Danny could get to the point where he was like our seventh man, it might be a lot more effective for him at this point in his career if we could get like that position. The problem is, between Tobias's weird fit with the team and the fifth starter being a question mark, it does make things a little bit more difficult, just generally speaking. So I do wonder, because going into last night, I was like, look, I'm willing to give the Thibault as a fifth starter thing a chance because right now we don't have a great option there. And if the other team has a star, like maybe he can bolster the defense enough that like he'll and create enough turnovers and get us out running in transition and all the Matisse things that he does that he can justify getting rotation minutes. Now we're going against the Minnesota Timberwolves. So I just want to keep that in mind. We're not, like you said,
who has been a great offense over the last 2 months or maybe the start of the year. I do want to make that clear. Obviously, second of back-to-back, but it's a really good offense. Has been really, really good.
Sure.
Cat figures out. D'Lo's figured it out too as of late. But yeah, I think both sides of it.
I just meant
both sides in it, I guess.
I just meant defensively, the teams that we will face when it comes to the playoffs, as you said, like the Celtics every time just completely ignore Thibault to the point where it just fucks up the spacing so badly. And like right now I'm willing to give it a chance and I'm willing to see what happens with it. And like to Doc's credit, in that Bucks game when Matisse did not have it, he pulled him and he sat him. And like
literally changed the game. They won it because of that decision.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe there will be games like that where you can figure out that Thibault is not that fifth guy and you can replace him with whoever's feeling it that night, whether it's Danny or it's Niang or it's Korkmaz or whoever that fifth guy can be that comes in off the bench can fill that role. Because I do worry a little bit just about like, all right, I'm thinking about last night and I'm like, first off, Tobias had some Tobias moments last night. It will take some time for him to get adjusted to not being an on-ball type dude that is like, running more actions and all that stuff. And you have James Harden, Joel Embiid with Maxey attacking off of closeouts and all that stuff, running secondary action stuff. I think that Tobias is going to take a little bit more to get used to being more of a spot-up guy, more of a guy who cuts, doing whatever. There were some possessions, like honestly, he shot 6 threes. I think he only made 2. He shot 5 in the first half, I think. Like, generally speaking, that's what I want Tobias to do.
Yeah.
I don't want Tobias to do when we're doing swing, and he stops the ball and he tries to get downhill. And then when he realizes nothing's out there, he turns back to Harden and throws it to him and resets the possession, which is what he did a handful of times last night. So it's going to take a little bit of time, but like overall between like, at least the engagement level on defense and like the effort level on defense being improved, even though he probably will still make some of those mistakes between that and like just the willingness as a shooter and like getting adjusted to being more of a role player, kind of like what he was when he first got here during the Jimmy Butler year, which did not have great results in the playoffs.
If you can play that role well, you're in a pretty
right. That's the thing. Is like Tobias as a play finisher is better in theory than it is in reality. And this is something that I've talked about a lot, is like him being part of a team and not doing, as Doc has said, Tobias things is like, is part of what is gonna, make or break his tenure with the Sixers. And last night, I at least saw moments where he was hustling for rebounds, playing hard on defense, and shooting open threes. That I was like, there's at least a base here for something that can work. If he was doing the entire game where he was resetting the possessions and stopping the ball and not shooting open threes and getting blown by on defense and all that stuff the entire game, I would be like, yeah, we might just be fucked. But but because he actually showed some moments like that last night, I'm not like totally pessimistic about that.
Yeah, and I think to Tobias's credit, he's played in so many different roles because he's been traded so many times. I think he has a little bit of malleability that maybe hasn't always been shown. And obviously, you and I know, I will criticize Tobias for his issues, but I think you have to be kind of optimistic because, I'm looking at the numbers, took six threes, that's 6 of his 9 shots. He's only taken 6 or more threes 7 times this year, and one of them was in James Harden's first game. I think Harden is also a guy who has enough kind of cachet to kind of coax that out of Tobias a little. I think maybe it was the same with Jimmy, but Harden just has more pull than Jimmy did or does, whatever you want to say there, because he's just a better player. And has more accomplishments as an offensive player, especially. So I think you have to be encouraged in that sense. But yeah, there were definitely times where I'm like, yeah, Harden's probably going to be frustrated occasionally with having his minutes tethered to his non-Joel minutes tethered to Tobias. But I think you can grow with that. And I think, as you mentioned, Tobias is going to have his issues, his spatial awareness. He's nowhere close to kind of the low man rotator you would like, despite that being a role he plays a lot. He has his issues as a passer as well, of course. Also, but side note, he made that skip pass to Furkan in the Bucks game, and I was like,
that was great.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know if I've seen Tobias make that.
He's even had a few of those passes this year where he's driving downhill, and usually he gets total tunnel vision, and he'll drive downhill and he'll see the guy. Harden relocated in the corner last night, and he hit him where Harden relocated right in his shooting pocket, and he nailed the 3. I was like,
he's had a cut early in the game. I think they ran maybe a Horns flare variation or something like that, and Matisse cut, and Tobias found him while he was getting downhill in a pick and roll, and it was I felt like one of those memes or whatever. I can't remember the name of it, but I'm sure I'm botching it. But anyhow, it was. But yeah, I think if you can get that out of him more, and again, this is you don't want to buy too much in the flashes for an established player like Tobias. He's
of course
29 or whatever. But I think the process, that's the general theme of this game last night, was the process was so encouraging. We're yes, you make 30 threes, you're going to win by 35 points, or whatever, they won by 31. But the way things happen, the quality of looks, Tobias taking 6 of his 9 shots from 3, those are all encouraging. Those are things that carry over, right? James Harden's not going to go 5 of 7 from 3 every game. Tobias or Max isn't going to make 12 of his 16 shots. But again, they didn't squeak out a win against a bad team. They won convincingly on the road over a playoff team, and one that's been playing pretty dang well recently. And yes, of course, back to back. I want to make clear, I don't want to overstate things, but the how and the why of that game occurring and whatnot is really, really encouraging. So, and that includes Tobias for the most part. So, the more they can get Tobias in favorable position defensively, the better. Obviously, that game was pretty. The game was the Wolves are a pretty good matchup defensively. I think especially when Ant isn't making shots for the Sixers, because they just don't they don't have anyone who's super explosive. D'Lo is kind of a guy who gets to his spots and makes stuff happen. He's a tremendously skilled player, but isn't blown by anyone. The Sixers have
pretty. He was even making tough shots over Maxey was playing decent defense on him, and he was just making tough shots.
So I think it's a good matchup for the Sixers defensively, but. You kind of see when you put all that side out there, and when Harden plays, and I'm sure we're gonna do when Harden plays defense like that, which I'm not he wasn't an all NBA defender, but when he does the things he has to do, which he didn't really do in Brooklyn, then the defense looks a lot better when you can have Joel kind of play that free roamer role like he did. And I thought he was really good defensively, for the most part, had a few lapses, but was definitely kind of off of just off the cuff, it felt like his best defensive game in a while. I don't know. He's
for sure, absolutely
really good start of the year. And since he kind of came back from COVID, it's been up and down. Especially as of late, he's been pretty meh for his standards. Still good, but not the all NBA all defense guy that he was to open the year. So when you can kind of get that matchup, you're definitely in a good spot. But the Knicks, I think, will be the same way. It's a good matchup for them. They don't really have anyone that kind of can get downhill. Obviously, Kemba has killed the Sixers for years, but Kemba's not in the rotation anymore. I hope he finds a place he wants to play and is healthy and all that. But I wonder what that first game is going to be like. I'm trying to, because they play the Heat. That's another good matchup for them. Team doesn't have a lot of explosive guys. Jimmy kind of can do his thing, but also
and I think they're done playing Boston for the year, and Boston has been a little bit of a thorn in their side when it comes to that kind of matchup, just because they have so many guys that can really exploit the drop coverage. They can get to their spot
on Friday. I don't know what Garland is doing. The Bulls will be an interesting one. That next, so they play the Heat on the Saturday, and then they play the Bulls on March 7th. I don't know what Levine's status is like. That's a guy who Matisse is giving trouble, but right, that's correctly. Matisse is bothered. Whatever. Matisse gives Zach Levine issues. That's all I'm trying to say.
He does. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's been one of the things is like the teams that I worry the most about the Sixers against defensively are the teams that have multiple wings that can score.
Yeah. So
Boston, Chicago, even the Nets. Like I know they have Kyrie and Kevin Durant, but like in that same general theme of like. Because if you have Matisse out there, it might compromise your offense a little bit. And then on top of that, athletically speaking, the Sixers, like a lot of the guys, like Paul Millsap looked like he was running in quicksand last night. And a lot of the guys on the team are just going to get exploited defensively. And that's going to be something that we have to figure out over the course of the rest of the season.
Yeah. And so but also the Bulls are just a good matchup for the Sixers because Vooch is a great player, really good, but he just can't guard Joel.
Joel's never lost to the Bulls in his career, including 3-0 this year.
Oh my god, it's like the Knicks Ben Simmons thing, which is
yeah, exactly.
Nice to have it's nice to have a I'm not weeping over the fact that Ben Simmons' era is over, but that bit was a nice one. It's hopefully it continues. I don't know. The Nets, he didn't play, but the Nets did win after the trade against the Knicks in that comeback game. So.
Are you? Oh my! I didn't even realize that the streak continues for Ben Simmons.
Neither did I, but I think some of these matchups are like good for if the offense can survive with Matisse, some of these matchups are kind of decent for Tobias. I'm not saying he's going to give DeMar DeRozan issues, but DeMar isn't a guy that's blowing by you, right? He's getting to his spots. Yep. So I wouldn't be surprised if that game next Monday you see Matisse on Zach LaVine, and if he plays and you throw Tobias on DeMar and kind of see what he can do with his big body and decent mobility skills for his size. So I think that's kind of a ripple effect, right? With Harden is that you can keep Matisse out there and maybe see what Tobias can do in these on-ball big wing stopper, quote unquote, obviously not a stopper, but kind of that role. Because you
we just need him to be scrappy.
Yeah, this he's the highest paid player on the team. We're talking about him like he's making the veteran minimum, which I'm not not criticizing Tobias for making the money. Get your thing, dude. Do your back.
Look, get your money, but also this is what we've come to. This is kind of people will joke about it when I talk about it in the Discord. They're like, this guy makes like $40 million a year. I'm like, we're here now. We don't have other options. I don't know what to tell you.
I was trying to clarify because I never want I don't like when people are like, oh, this is what you you demand things of the highest paid player. Like, no, I don't give a shit. Who cares if it's high? But yeah, it's funny that we're talking about the guy who is making the most money. He's a bench player making the MLE or whatever.
And in Tobias's defense, actually, 2 of his best games this year, if I remember correctly, came against Chicago and Miami. Those matchups have actually offensively. Miami.
Because they don't neither of them have a normal 4, and Tobias kills those types of teams. He killed Washington last in the playoffs because they didn't have any size of the 4. So and Miami, I think they have I don't know who they started the 4, PJ. I think it might be. But he's small too. PJ's a great defender. He's been great this year. But Tobias, if Tobias can get to a spot to shoot over you, he's gonna be comfortable. And obviously the Bulls, especially without Patrick Williams, who might be back at some point, but it's still a second-year player who's kind of effectively in his first year, more or less, still in terms of NBA on-court experience. But yeah, those matchups are good for Tobias. So I think it's just kind of another ripple effect of the Harden trade. Is you put Tobias in better spots. You put everyone in better spots when you have an all NBA caliber creator. As you mentioned, he's not the MVP candidate of yesteryear, but is an all NBA guy who the Sixers haven't had since I don't know, you'd have to AI based. I don't know,
Iverson. Yeah, really. If you think about from just the scoring punchability, and one of the things that we keep talking about is once again, Jimmy was good when he was here, but Jimmy being a primary when he wasn't Miami Jimmy, when he really took another level in his game. And also they surrounded him with kind of the perfect pieces with Bam as that vertical spacing big and then a ton of movement shooters around him, and like really figured out how to optimize Jimmy Butler. Having James Harden, like guys, Harden is, and Maxey talked about it about the game after the game last night. Harden is so hard to guard because you have to play up on him because of the shooting threat, but he can get to that step back, and then you don't want to land in his landing space so that because it's happened twice, he'll get it, he'll get the bucket, and he'll get the foul. But also, you want to play up on him because he will just pick you apart. Like if they put 2 on the ball with Harden with the ball, he makes the right pass every single time.
The Max play in the second half, right, where I think he was on the right wing. D'Lo was kind of shading help. He swings the ball to Max in the corner, who has been brilliant attacking off the catch all year, but now has more opportunities to do that. Hits
that was my favorite play all game, by the way. That was, I mean,
first, but it was like you have to help there because Harden has been killing the Wolves all night off the dribble, and then you leave a guy who is masterful and has like the best turbo jets in the NBA. Maybe I don't know.
Shot out of a cannon.
Yeah, exactly. I'm probably sliding De'Aaron Fox or whatever, but those Kentucky guys, I guess, are just
I don't know what's in the water there, but he was just literally in the blink of an eye at the rim, like holy shit, what just happened? And
a few times, right? Like,
what was that?
This happens in transition too, right? A couple of times, like he goes from the free throw line to the rim, and you're like, do I have to rewind that? How the hell did he get there so quickly?
And that might be the one element that people overlooked for Harden. Like Harden isn't going to be Ben Simmons and sprint down the court and be, a fucking speeding bullet in transition and barrel over guys and stuff. But he has the ability to make those outlet passes where I'm like, this is a guy that literally the Sixers, like, once again, we keep talking about passing, but just like having a guy who can make those passes and hit guys in stride like a quarterback in transition to be able to get to like those easy buckets that Maxey got of like 2 or 3 of last night. And like that feels like one of the things where like I don't think that their transition attack will be maybe as deadly as it was last year, but like the half court offense is going to be much better. And then on top of that, you have a guy who can create transition opportunities with his passing that it really feels like, and someone made a poll before the game last night, who is James Harden going to help more, Tobias Harris or Tyrese Maxey? And my answer was Tyrese Maxey, because I was like, not only is he going to give him those opportunities in transition, because like one of the things about Maxey is he'll get used to it and he'll get better with it. But like when he tends to get the ball in transition, he tends to be a little bit like he could be more decisive. Like he could try to get to the rim. He could try to look for guys, whatever. He kind of tends to be like, all right, what am I supposed to do when I get the ball? Yeah. Like he's looking at Joel, he's looking at Doc, and like with Harden being there, that will help him in transition. It will help him when, and by the way, D'Lo, help defense has actually been really good this year, apparently. Yeah. He's taken a step in the right direction as a defender.
He's calling everything out. He's all like Jared Vanderbilt is great. I love him. But D'Lo is often the one like telling like, hey, Jared, you got to be here. You got to be there. Like all these things. But yeah, I think the thing that I took away is the Sixers have 2 guys before James Harden, right? In this era of this season, they had 2 guys who can do stuff in transition, right? Basically on the ball, which is Maxey and Joel. And now you give Maxey, you give Maxey a guard who can handle the ball and do stuff in transition. You let him be a play finisher rather than kind of the play starter. You see the benefits of that. You see, like, I mean, the highlight of it was the cross court feed, I think in the first half, maybe the second half, I can't recall exactly, where Harden finds him. Maxey is shot out of a can on the right wing and finishes there. So you give him that, and you just reinvent the entire transition offense. I looked at so the Sixers coming into the game, or maybe it was after the game, I think it might have been priced in. A 96.35 pace was about, I think, 25th or so in the NBA. Last night, 102, which one game, it was like the highest pace in the NBA this year, I think, is like 101 point something by the Rockets to the Lakers. I don't recall exactly, but that's exactly the sort of thing, right? Because it's a skill to generate transition opportunities. Right? If everyone could play in transition so often, they would. Like the Bucks have great offenses at times because Giannis is the best transition player in the NBA. Like it's like that is a skill of Ben and Giannis, Harden, Maxey, whoever it is, to generate better up. Like it's always like you look at synergy, it's always more like the points per possession are always higher in transition because you attack a defense that isn't set, you're going to have more success. So getting Harden in that situation just helps the entire offense. And I think you saw that last night. He had to play Matisse. I think Matisse leaked out after a miss and he threw it over the top. Matisse had a dunk. I think the Wolves are a team that I think if I recall, kind of like to crash the offensive glass a lot. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know they're a much better offensive rebounding team than defensive rebounding team. And so that definitely helps if you have 2 or 3 guys who are kind of in the paint, on the offensive side of the paint. That it's going to be easier to score in transition. But I think that was kind of a thing that I felt like I thought about this entire fit for 2 weeks or whatever it was. But there were definitely just things that I couldn't really conceptualize until it happened. And I maybe obviously I can't think of everything, right? Maybe I miss things and that's on me. But the transition stuff was really something that I hadn't considered enough. And maybe it's just because Harden, isn't a guy who was doing what Ben does, right? As you said, like he's not leading the breaking, just pushing the pace relentlessly, but he is great at making passes to guys who are good in transition, and the Sixers have
exactly
guys.
And Tobias was good in transition last year because he was kind of that co-partner to Ben in the fast break. And it's like maybe he could be the co-partner to Harden or Maxey or someone that can create those opportunities for him and kind of get back some of what we saw. I literally think he was the most efficient transition scorer in the NBA at one point last year.
Interesting, yeah. But also, like, I think you put Harden with 4. I think because I would classify the Sixers 4 other starters around Harden right now as Matisse, Maxey, Joel, and Tobias as pretty good transition players. I think in the open floor, and so you give those guys a ball handler who can make basically every pass in transition. It's like, oh, okay, like well, and I mean Joel's always like Joel. I think one of the most things I always appreciate about Joel is he just kind of rolls with whatever the team environment is. You're going to play slower because you want to, sure. You can play faster because Ben's there. Harden is like he's good in transition. He's obviously been great with the grab and goes, but he's also really good at kind of those deep seals. He can make stuff happen as kind of in the catch and go now. So he's fine to play faster if he needs to. It's totally cool. I mean, he's just we could sit here all day and sing Joel's praises, but the malleability and the versatility of his game. He just kind of goes with whatever is necessary. And I think this is one of those examples where, they play slow this year because, Joel is best when he's methodical and figure things out in the half court. But he's shown that, you want to play faster, let's do it. I don't care. Like, I'm cool with that. That means that I get to rest for 4 seconds on defense and kind of figure things out and be my brilliant self on that end. Let's do it. So, the transition game is something I hadn't really conceptualized, and it was tough to kind of project until it happened. It's just been one game, but I think that's like I said, that massive spike in pace, and it's only one game, like 6 possessions that that can kind of happen, by happenstance a little bit. Maybe take 3 or 4 possessions where the ball caroms off the rim and ignites transition, but only one game. But I think like I said, the process. I keep harping on that. People are going to do the process puns, but it's the best way to describe it.
It is. It's true.
Yeah, it's just the best word to kind of talk was encouraging. So very much, I'm going to monitor the rest of the year, kind of see where they're at pace wise, and NBA stats are beautiful because you can filter, you can segment versus the post Harden era, not post, I guess current Harden era. Jesus, don't want to.
We're not there yet. We'll wait till the summer for that.
But I can segment what the pace they played at before Harden arrived versus the pace they play after. So definitely I'm going to keep monitoring, and I'm sure I'll write about it at some point if it gets to be a worthy sample. But I think that was the biggest takeaway for me that I didn't foresee when I thought about this fit, for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think so too. It didn't even enter my mind at all. It was literally always like, because ultimately, like, transition is great, especially in the regular season. And when we get to the playoffs, it's more half court oriented. That's just kind of how it goes. The Bucks might have been kind of the exception to that rule because they have Giannis last year. It's like their half court offense was largely bad for the first 7 games of the playoffs, and they figured it out to the point where they didn't even need an elite half court offense to win the title. And the Sixers in the first round last year, they had opportunities to get out and run in transition, but they were also playing against the Washington Wizards. The matchups they're going to get this year in the playoffs are going to be much more difficult. Even from the first round, you could run into the Toronto Raptors or the Brooklyn Nets. You're not going to have the same opportunities that you had when the East was a joke and you were able to just essentially steamroll a team in the first round. So kind of figuring these things out, I do wonder if in these last 20 games, because once again, I think the person that the Harden and Embiid obviously 100% benefit from each other for sure. I think Tyrese Maxey probably benefits. Now there is a little bit of proof of concept of like Tyrese Maxey really benefiting from being that secondary ball handler, that guy that can operate, as you said, as a play finisher as opposed to a initiator. Mm-hmm. And I think that will help him take in terms of like, he might not even put up as many points on every single night. He might not have as many on-ball reps, and he might not have blah, blah, blah. And the counting stats might not be even as good as they were before Harden got there, and they certainly were last night. But from a pure impact standpoint on what Tyrese Maxey needs to be as a player at his age, at 21 years old, like, I can't think of a better situation than this has been. And I think that was something that was a little bit undersold, because even I thought, like, yes, it will help Maxey, but like, I didn't foresee him getting such easy looks. And like, you keep talking about the process, and it's like, everyone said it. Like, Tobias said he went up to Doc last night and was like, I don't think I've ever had that many wide open looks in my career. Like, Harden creates the most open shots for teammates, other than it's SIS Hoops released something like a week or two ago. Mm-hmm. And they had, I believe Trey was number 1, Luka was number 2, and Harden was number 3. Like, he's just going to generate open looks for guys, and that's going to be something that the Sixers will need to transition to, and they'll need to figure out kind of like, I'm just like, because Maxey's become a good enough shooter now that you have to close out on him. Like, he's not going to put up 10 threes a game, although I'd like to see him up his volume a little bit, just because make the threat of that closeout a little bit more realistic. But if you close out on Maxey, you're cooked. Like, you're like, that's the thing about him functioning with a on-ball creator who can create open looks for him. It just feels like it's going to take his game to the next level.
Yeah, and to your point, just also shout out SIS Hoops. Like, they're doing a bunch of really cool stuff. Would recommend.
Yeah, their stuff's great.
Really, really awesome stuff. But yeah, they released a stat on Valentine's Day. It's what they define as potential assists on open shots. Luka at 7.7, Trey 7, Chris Paul 6.8, Harden at 6.1. So yeah, 4th overall.
Crazy.
That's I would be curious to kind of know, like, exactly kind of, and the Nets didn't have great space in this year, so like, you know, maybe exactly what that looks like in terms of who's getting open shots. But the point being is Harden creates a bunch of open shots, and you know, kind of moving with that point. The Sixers' 3-point rate last night, I think I tweeted it out. Let me see if I can pull it up here.
I saw some shit, and I was like, once again, this is the Sixers? They're allowed to shoot 43s in a game?
Yeah, so last night, I think this is from Cleaning the Glass. Their 3-point rate was 48.7, so nearly half their shots. On the year, they're just about 33%. Again, one game, you don't want to read, but again, you saw. Well. Yes, you saw like how it happened, right? They weren't just like stumbling into threes because like late in the clock, like they got good looks. And of course, yeah, you shoot 48.7% from 3. Like you shot like you're gonna, which is now I'm all off. Like, they had the same percentage as they did, like their rate was the same as their success rate. That's weird. But
that is weird. But also, I will say the difference in the score was exactly how many threes the Sixers made versus how many threes the Wolves made. I believe we made 10 more threes than them throughout the game, and we won by like 30. So that really was the difference.
Yeah, and that's like, of course you get hot, but they also didn't shoot the ball from 2-point range. I don't know, they weren't shooting well overall from 2 for a while. I don't know if that changed. They ended up going 23 of 43, which is okay. That's probably about league average, but point, like, the threes and Doc, one of the things that like drives me was Doc always has this line of like, I don't care where the shots come from, just that, and it, like, I wrote about before the year because Joel talked about the team wanting to shoot more threes, and it was like, your offensive efficiency is tied to where you shoot shots from. Like, they're not independent factors, Doc. And I know Doc understands that. I'm not trying to belittle him. Like, I hate that, like, sometimes when I talk about it, I feel like I'm patronizing a guy who knows.
But you're right. You're totally right. He acts like it exists in a vacuum.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh yeah, you take a long 2. Like, yeah, your offense, like the shot, like not every made shot is created equal. Like, a long 2 is not the same as like a 3. Like, you have guys who can shoot threes. That's my whole thing, right? It's like, it's not the Sixers are somebody that like is great, like scoring in the paint or room pressure or pull up jumpers. You have shooters, like you've had, and so now you get Harden, and all of a sudden you're taking almost half your shots from 3. And I think, you know, I don't know. I would be curious. Kind of, again, this is everything we're talking about. I feel like it's just something to monitor moving forward. But I am curious to kind of see what that does moving forward. And if it continues, credit to Doc, credit to Harden, credit to everyone else. But yeah, that was one of my other takeaways, that just they got up so many threes, and that it was just encouraging. It wasn't even from their, like, obviously Harden took 7 of his 12 shots from beyond the arc. But like Joel took 5, but that's not like, I think that's probably about right around maybe his high for the year. I'm sure he's taken, had 6 or 7 a few times.
He only averages like 3 a game, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And like Maxey only took 3. Like and I mean those 3 guys, Harden, Maxey, and Embiid combined for 89 points, 87 before kind of the bench was emptied there. But it wasn't those guys. It was, Danny Green, all of his shots were from 3, 5. He was 2 of 5. George Niang took 3 of his 4 shots from deep. Tobias will consider 6 of his 9 shots. Furkan, both of his shots from deep. Isaiah Joe, that wasn't with Harden, but 3 of his 4 shots. And so like they just took the shots that came to them, and that was most encouraging. So
it feels like a shift in mindset to me.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah,
like I think having a creator like Harden that creates those open looks is definitely beneficial. But like, there's definitely more of like, these are the and like he even said it when he wasn't playing. He said to George Niang, "That's not your game. You're not a driver. Don't get downhill. Don't try to do that unless you have to. Shoot 10 threes a game. I'm going to create the looks for you. Like, you're going to get it." Like, having that mindset. And as you said, Joel wanted to do it coming into the year. And then we got into the year, and I went on a podcast. Shout out to the Saturday Slam and Jam, which is one of my favorite podcasts on The Athletic. But they had me on, and they said the Sixers shoot like they're 28th in shooting threes or whatever this year. Who are the teams that are behind them in the trivia section? And I was like, "Oh, I know this." And they were like, "You know it?" And I was like, "The Bulls and the Wizards." And they were like, "Yeah, how'd you know that?" And I'm like, "Because it drives me insane that we don't shoot more threes." Like, we're in the modern NBA, when you have Joel Embiid, you have Seth Curry, and you have like we should shoot more threes. But now we have not only the guy who can create those threes, which shout out to Ben Simmons, who, Mr. Created 3. Sixers Adams tweet last night had me cracking up. Yeah,
that too.
James Harden passing Ben Simmons on the all-time
Only tied him for the most.
Oh, we only tied Ben Simmons for the most. Okay, Ben made 5. Wow, I only remember like 2 or 3, but that's impressive. Yeah. But this basically having a guy who can create his own shot, can create threes for other guys, Joel's paint presence, creating swing pass opportunities, and all of the shooters coming off the bench now. If that is the case, when you're figuring out these staggered lineups, that's going to be what's most interesting to me. Mm-hmm. Because at one point it was literally Joel and 4 shooters, and I don't even think that. I think defensively we kind of got cooked during that little run, but I was just like, I like the idea of this when Harden and Joel are out there, and only having like one non-shooter, whether it's Matisse or Harden with maybe a center that isn't Paul Millsap, and just having like that kind of functioning offense that makes it so hard to guard everyone.
Yeah, and I think, to the point about the staggering, what one of the things that stood out to me, that were like, Adam and I were talking about this for a while last night, but like one of the things that stood out to me, we were talking about everything basically under the sun about this game, but the bench didn't take many shots. I mean, you look at Danny Green, 5 shots, George Niang, 4 shots, Shake Milton, 3 shots, Furkan, 2. And I guess if you want to get shooting possessions in their total, a couple of 4 free throws, so basically, 4 total shooting possessions.
And of course, Korkmaz missed 2. Somehow the worst free throw shooter of all time for a shooter. It doesn't make any sense.
Millsap have a couple of shots. Like that's what you want, right? You want, like, the Sixers don't have some great bench. They have guys who can fill roles well off the bench, but you want that. You want Harden still driving things. You want Embiid driving things. And so that was what stood out to me too, is when I looked at, like, that's a product of the staggering. You keep an elite shot creator out there, and these guys who are ill-suited to create for themselves offensively don't have to, unless the ball swings their way. And so that was another thing that stood out to me. One of the lone negatives from this game for me was I didn't love how much like Matisse still played with Joel. I'm looking at the numbers here. I'm trying to find the line. Let's see.
I do wonder, do you think that's because of the fact that they kind of had a little bit of like, in certain games, like the Cavs game specifically, in my brain stands out. That was it might be a little bit of recency bias, but they have had a little bit of chemistry with the cutting when they run the offense out of one side, and then they'll leave Matisse open in the opposite corner, and then Matisse can cut cut on the baseline, and Joel can usually find him. Like, they already have maybe a little bit of chemistry built in, even though against good defenses, like we said, like the Celtics, that has kind of bit them in the ass, because the Celtics will just put 2 on the ball and force Joel to make a decision, and a lot of the times that will end poorly.
Yeah, I think that could be my issue. There is like, it's tougher to get you all the you can play the 3 of them together. I don't care, because Harden can make that entry pass from anywhere basically. You can sit courtside and throw it in there. But like, they played 21 minutes last night without Harden. And to their credit, the Sixers were plus 11 in those minutes. They only shot 42% from the field, 28% from 3. They had 14 free throws in that time during the 21 minutes. So I would be curious to kind of see the defense numbers there. But I didn't love that. Like, I just think, like, I'm fine playing all 3 of them together. But I think if you're gonna put Matisse with one of those guys, just conceptually, you want it more with Harden, because of the quality, because like Joel, for all of his greatness, still can't just initiate every possession. He can do it sometimes, but like, he's not going to always be able to capitalize on teams, ignoring Matisse. Harden is a better dribbler. That's how things work. And also
they're going to send double teams at him at the top of the key, and he'll be able to hit Matisse if he's cutting. And also on top of that, it's just going to create way more 4-on-3 opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's funny, because last year, I think Mike O'Connor over at the Rice Regan just wrote an article about why Matisse should be used more like Bruce Brown. And I think that makes sense. The issue before Harden's arrival was they didn't have an on-ball creator to generate all those benefits.
They didn't have James Harden, who was running a lot of actions with Bruce Brown.
And now I'm curious, Bruce Brown, obviously has Kyrie and KD still, but I think like Matisse is like kind of a decent passer too. Like, despite not really having, like, he's kind of a good connective passer. He can do stuff as a cutter. He's a good swing passer too. And so I think like that's another way. Like, if they're going to throw 2 on the ball, and I'm curious, like, I want to see like how often teams throw 2 at Harden on the ball, because it's Harden versus their scheme. Like the Wolves trap, they do all that aggressive stuff. Like, some of that's probably Harden. Like, they also threw a bunch of different looks. They tried drop, they tried switching. But I am curious to kind of see like how often Harden draws doubles because it's Harden versus like that scheme. So, but that's a situation too, where like, that's why it's a good idea to throw Matisse with Harden, because of the defense. Like, obviously, like, Joel's a better defender than Harden, so like, you feel better about the defense without Matisse out there, and Harden has his own struggles defensively, so you feel better on the perimeter if he's kind of flanking Harden out there.
Absolutely.
So that, and to be fair, like, they still play a decent amount. Like, I'm trying to look it up here. So that's the wrong thing here. They still played. They didn't play at all. My goodness, they didn't play at all. Sorry. Hold up. No, they played 20 minutes without Joel. It was just Matisse and Harden. Sorry, I had the filters off. I'm messing things up there. But 20 minutes without Joel on the floor, while Harden and Matisse shared the court. Plus 23 in limit. The Sixers were didn't shoot well from the field, 35%, only 35% from 3 as well. So they kind of a good balance there. But I don't want to see 21 minutes of Matisse plus Joel minus Harden minutes. I just think, as for all the reasons touched on, it makes more sense conceptually to kind of, anchor Matisse and Harden. So we'll see what happens. I think it's also important to experiment, right? I think we talked about before the show, like before the podcast, like we know the Sixers knew the regular season, right? It's that they shouldn't be harping on that at this point. They got the 1 seed last year and couldn't get beyond the second round.
They have 2 of the greatest regular season players of all time.
Yeah, you're going to be fine there. So that's the other thing. I want to see them experiment. I'm not really like, I'm not like, don't really want to be. I probably starting a little too critical. Like, I think it's good to experiment and see what you can do in those Matisse drill minutes, because ideally, or theoretically, you could be really, really good defensively, generate a lot of transition stuff as well. So I get it, but I didn't love that. But I'm not trying to harp on it too much, because I think it is important to experiment, and that was kind of the basis of my article, right? The idea that like, just try different things while you can. I mean, you have such good floor raisers in the regular season that you can kind of afford to do kind of experiment and whatnot. And once the Sixers have a pretty tough schedule maybe the next 2 or 3 weeks, but after that it's pretty smooth for them. I think they have a couple of games late against the Pacers and the Pistons and stuff. So they always seem to end the year on a positive note in terms of quality of opponent, I guess. So but yeah, I think it's important to experiment. But yeah, didn't love that. But again, I don't want to be too harsh on it, because it is important to try a bunch of different looks, because you need to. You're trying to integrate 2 superheroes together in 25 games, and so you gotta throw a bunch of different stuff at the wall, and we'll see. But yeah, I think it makes
it's incredibly unique. Like there's really never been a situation like this before, because guys like Harden don't get traded at the deadline ever. Like I thought about it, and I literally think the last guy that got traded at the deadline that was like, I believe Pau Gasol got traded 12 years. Was it did Pau Gasol get traded at the deadline? There was someone
he was a deadline guy.
It was 13 years ago or whatever it was. Pau Gasol 14 years ago. Pau Gasol gets traded at the deadline. The Lakers make it to the finals. The other one I could think of was Clyde Drexler in the 90s for the Rockets. They're the 6th seed. That has been the comparison that I've made to this. I think Harden obviously has had a better career than Clyde Drexler, but in terms of like, they're 32 years old. They're both 32. I believe, obviously Drexler got traded to the Rockets, and Joel has the Hakeem comparisons and always has had that kind of loose comparison to him. And my thing was basically like Harden could never beat Curry. Drexler could never beat MJ. Like there are a lot of parallels there that I think that you could make. And that was really the last time that we saw this kind of like integration between I guess other than Gasol, a big and a perimeter player that ended up going on to win the title. So that is the hope. That is the model that we have here. I think they even had more games together. And by the way, I did look it up. The Hornets, they played the Hornets in their first game and they blew the doors off of them. And the Hornets were a good team that year. They had a similar record to what the Timberwolves had right now. So I'm just saying it might be fate that this is what is happening right now. So I don't want to fall to the 6th seed, but
yeah, they played Clyde played 35 games after that trade, 95. Was also much better post trade. Just looking at the stats, obviously, I wasn't even an idea of when that happened, but yeah, play a little more, but was better from the field, better from 2-point range, about the same from 3. Harden also was down on 2s before the trade. Yeah, you got.
I'm just saying, stay woke, dude. I got on my Bill Simmons and was like, we need a historical comparison here. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, I mean, it's not perfect especially because the Rockets won the title the year before. Yeah. Like they already had a championship. So it's not like, obviously the most perfect, but that was the closest comparison I could think of that had a great result to it that we would realistically hope for.
An unprecedented trade in general. If you take such a big scope. Last year the Nets and the Sixers were the two teams competing for Harden. The Sixers tried to trade Ben Simmons for James Harden, and then a year later, they're still that was the two teams everyone thought was going to meet in the conference finals, right? Or most people, I should say, don't speak for everyone. Props if you.
Nikias is furious.
Yeah. I don't want to. But yeah, you look at that, and then a year later, Harden's unhappy, and they're trading, and Ben Simmons is unhappy, and they're trading for each other in the middle of the year. Conference rivals, division rivals, both trying to win the title. It doesn't happen. Like it's just you don't trade your. Let's call Harden 3rd best player on the Nets. If you like Kyrie, whatever you want to do, I don't care. You don't trade your 3rd best player, who's an all-star, all NBA caliber guy, like to a
who was in the MVP conversation last year on your team. Like I don't think he finished I don't even know if he finished top 5, but he was in the convo.
Yeah. Before the hamstring injury I think he might have finished like 7th or 10th. I don't know exactly, but if you go to the Basketball Reference, he's got MVP shares or whatever the thing they call it. So yeah,
and that doesn't happen. Like it blows my mind how it actually did happen.
The bench side of things, right? Like year 2 of a max contract, you made All NBA a year and a half ago. Just I don't know.
Really strange, just incredibly strange happenings. But the two things I want to get to before we get out of here is so first off, the free throws. We're going to become like the free throw bros. I already saw the Mario and Luigi with Harden and Embiid. I saw people coping about it last night. I have come up with a new nickname. This is just something I want to touch on here. Even Paul Millsap was grifting last night. Like he was posting up Naz Reid, getting into his face a little bit, and like getting to the line. Like
on grifter too, I will say he is not co-opting anyone's brand.
I don't even remember Paul Millsap before he played for the Nuggets. To be honest,
he's loved the footwork and the spins and the shot fakes. Like his free throw rate for his career is about 38%. So in his prime, he was very much a grifter, but he just
fits in. Good. I'm glad we have more grifters. So I have a nickname for us, which is the Grift and Grind Sixers. So we are going to fully lean into this. We are going to be the grifting team. We're going to be the team that everyone hates to face. Like, I want people to watch us and be like, oh, we gotta fucking play. It's like when we play against the Raptors or the Heat, and I'm like, Nick Nurse, Spoelstra are going to come up with some fucking plan, and it's going to stifle our offense, and it happens every single time, except for the last Heat game somehow. Like, even when the Raptors don't have Kyle Lowry and Kawhi Leonard and DeMar DeRozan, like, all these years later, like, we still have struggles with them because of what they can do defensively. I want to be the offensive version of that, where no one can just guard us. So it becomes to the point where everyone's just like, all right, I guess we're just gonna have to send them to the line the entire time, and Patrick Beverley's gonna like threaten to fight us twice a game. Like, I want that. I want to lean into that. So we are now the grift and grind Sixers. I don't know what you think of that, but
no, I think that's great. I mean, they already led the league in free throw rate coming into the year, according to Basketball Reference. They were, I'm sorry, they're fourth. Excuse me, I can't even tell. 26% of their, had a 26% free throw rate. Last night they had a 40.5% free throw rate, which is 99th percentile according to Cleaning the Glass. So,
and they weren't even grifted as hard as they could. Like, it wasn't like the pull throughs and like.
Joel had a few before he kind of caught fire, but I mean,
yeah.
Harden had one or two. Harden had one play where he definitely tried to draw a foul. Was pretty pissed they didn't call a foul. The ball was like swiped out of his hand by Torian Prince, something like that. But yeah, for the most part, like, yeah, obviously, I'm sure you agree. But like, teams are gonna teams are gonna hate playing the Sixers. I get it, but also like when people try to like diminish like what they do, like I just think it's like I literally just tweeted out the screenshot that the NBC Sports Philadelphia called this Joel and James weird to call him James, Embiid and Harden, the players of the game. I just created the screenshot. It was like, I thought Sixers fans would enjoy it. And people were like, oh, like post free throws, or like, oh, like you're grifting. It's like, did you watch the game? Like the Timberwolves didn't have a prayer of stopping them. And like, nobody has a prayer of stopping Joel ever. Like, people are always like, oh, like it won't work in the playoffs. I'm pretty sure Joel has a higher career free throw rate in the playoffs than he does in the regular season, because nobody can ever stop him. And he hasn't even been great as a scorer in the playoffs at times. Like, and so I get it. Like, you want to make fun of him. You don't want to watch him. You do. Like, you don't want to play him. Like, we
got to lean into it because people are going to do it anyway. Yeah. So we're just gonna be the grifting and grind.
Like, are you watching it? Like, there's no one can stay in front of James Harden, and no one can stop Joel one-on-one because he's like having like one of the greatest scoring seasons ever. Like, he's averaged like 45 points per 100 possessions. It's freaking ridiculous.
Insane. Absolutely insane. I saw you post that yesterday and was like, I mean, still to this day, per 36, I'm pretty sure he is the highest scorer of all time in terms of per 36 numbers. So just absolutely insane. Or it was like him and Michael Jordan went back and forth at one point, and I think because of the last two seasons, he on a per 36 basis actually has a higher average than like better than
Jordan. That's the definitive takeaway from this. Joel Embiid is a better player. That's the word.
I mean, that's anyone who listens to this podcast already knows that, though. So I didn't even have to bring it up, to be honest. But all right, so last two things we want to hit on here. I just want to say I was going to talk about the Bradley Beal thing. I don't really care about it. I just thought it was funny that Bill Simmons was hyping up this thing about why Harden and Embiid wouldn't work. Then he comes out and says, basically, Joel Embiid wanted to play with his friend Bradley Beal, and that's why they won't. And I'm like, but we got a better player, and we got someone who is clearly going to raise this team's ceiling. And like, I like Bradley Beal, but like ultimately, Bradley Beal wouldn't have taken us to the level that James Harden can take us. So I'm just going to leave that be. I think that was some smoke, some bullshit. But just generally talking about the backup center and the backup wings. So more so the backup center than anything else. I love Paul Millsap. I love what he brings to the locker room. I love like the idea of what he can be as a player. He's 37 years old, and he seems like the kind of guy. Yeah. And he seems like a kind of guy that would even in an ideal scenario, if he's your backup center, he's got to be a little bit more dependent on matchups. Mm-hmm. So last night, once again, I said he looked like he was moving in quicksand at certain points. Like there was that possession where he actually beat Naz Reid with a move, and then Naz Reid had so much time to recover and swat it away because he just could not finish like quickly enough. Yeah. And I'm concerned. Do you think that we will see a run from Willie Cauley-Stein, Charles Bassey, or Paul Reed over the next few weeks? Because I'm concerned that if you've ever heard this before, the backup center could be an issue for the Sixers.
Yeah, not familiar with that.
Oh,
You
don't know that one.
Cover the Sixers for long enough. I mean, everyone knows about the Toronto series, of course, and Greg Monroe. The devastating 2 minutes from Greg Monroe to end the first half of Game 7. Sorry to rehash trauma for any Sixers fans, but
he didn't even give us a trigger warning.
Yeah, so yeah, geez, my God, I never had been on the podcast because I did that. But yeah, I think I could see Cauley Stein getting some minutes, maybe maybe the second Knicks game, just because they'll have 2 days. They'll have 2 days off. They'll play practice on Tuesday. I know they practice on Thursday, but obviously, he was signed Thursday or Wednesday, so still kind of getting himself in order or whatever. But I think that makes sense too, because you saw that like him and Harden aren't a great fit. Harden loves the rim runner. I don't see Bassey or Reed. Doc isn't going to trust him, which is a bummer, because I thought like Paul Reed actually played really well in that Thunder game. His ability to create stuff defensively with his length and even like as a cutter offensively and create offensive rebounds is really useful. But obviously I understand the hesitancy. But Bassey, I would like to see get around. I think Bassey. He's looked really good, like especially for a late second round pick. I think he was like right mid 50s, late 40s, can't recall exactly, but he's looked really good. Like he can finish plays, he sets good screens, his pick and roll defense is pretty good. I would love to see
destroyed in the G League the other day.
Yeah, I don't know I mean, I saw he had a huge dunk. That's about the only thing I saw.
He had 8 blocks.
And yeah, that like he's pretty like he can make stuff happen there. Like he's had like I remember. When Joel was out on that big, long West Coast road trip, he had a couple of good games, maybe against the Kings or the Nuggets. I don't recall exactly. Maybe had some good minutes against the Warriors, too, on the road. But I like to see him get somewhere. I really think he's a guy that like could amplify what Harden likes to do and also benefit from Harden more than Millsap. So my answer is I think that they should definitely keep experimenting, which is one of the themes we've talked about on this podcast. I don't love the fit with Millsap, even I think Millsap can bring stuff as a passer, maybe as a floor spacer. Hasn't been great this year from 3, but it's been a pretty solid stretch big for a few years now. It doesn't make sense with Harden much because he likes a rim runner. Reed, I don't think is going to get minutes, but Bassey, I would love to see get minutes, but I don't think it's going to happen. But I definitely think Cauley Stein has a chance after he gets more practice in him. And so we'll see what happens there. But Cauley Stein definitely makes sense. He has his own issues, but just is a much better vertical threat than Paul Millsap because of physical tools and the fact that he's like 4 inches taller, 5 inches taller than.
Yeah, right.
I mean, yeah. 7, 6, 8 Millsap.
I've heard one of his issues can be, and I talked about this. I made a quick video for YouTube the other day, and what a lot of Mavs and Kings and Warriors fans told me was like he just doesn't have great hands. Like basically, like he can create. If he has someone like a Luka or someone that can create Harden who can create those opportunities for him, he can like get to the point where it looks good. And then a lot of the times he can't finish the dunks, or he just kind of has stone hands in general. But I will say, I think that I would like to, like, and I said in that video, generally speaking, these finals teams, the recent history has suggested finals teams usually don't have second-year players. Right now we have a second-year player in the rotation that's a full-blown starter, good, very good young player in Tyrese Maxey. Then we have, coming off the bench, Bassey and Reed both have not gotten a ton of run, but they've had moments. Mm-hmm. And Bassey, especially, I go back to that Nuggets game, the defense he played on Jokic was like...
Oh, yeah, that was the game. Yeah, that game. He was
incredible. Awesome. I mean, that was when I did my live podcast, and I was like, who is this person? Like, I don't even know who this... Like, Jokic was, in the first half, was absolutely cooking. Yeah. And then... throughout the game, Bassey kind of figured it out and got in his head a little bit. And then when the Nuggets were down, and like Jokic is obviously could be the MVP of the league, if not the runner-up, and he was the MVP last year. And I was just really impressed with the defense he was able to play on him. And I think that, like, of that archetype of big, like if Cauley Stein, he's on a 10-day contract, if he proves in this little run that he's not capable of doing that, which I think he should get the opportunity because he's a veteran. He's been on like not great teams, but like decent teams before like he's gotten rotation minutes with Dallas over the last 2 years. Like I would like to see Cauley Stein get an opportunity. And if he just turns out to not be the guy, whether it's because his athleticism is bad or his hands aren't good enough, because athleticism has declined, I've heard. I would love to see, I'm totally with you that I think I would love, because like I like Paul Reed, but he still feels a little bit too chaotic to me to be like a reliable Doc guy. Like once again, we're trying to think from the perspective of Doc, and like Doc likes comfortable guys. He likes guys like Reed might have theoretically the most upside of all these players, but Cauley-Stein and especially Bassey seem like the safest pick to me that can fill that role.
Yeah, especially in these small. I mean, because you think about like second round, Joel's probably going to be playing about 40 minutes or so, 38 to 40. Especially in that small sample, there's just too much variance in Paul Reed's game. I think he could gamble for 3 plays and allow 2 cuts, and he's a -6 in 4 minutes, right? And so I think that's kind of an issue too. But yeah, and I think every coach is that way, right? Like obviously we talk about, but like every coach wants to trust guys and to feel reliable, especially in the playoff rotation. So yeah, I'm not going to pretend like I know a ton about Willie Cauley-Stein at this point. Obviously, I watch as much of the league as I can, but he's like a second, third, fourth string center, and not.
He's fine. I think he's fine for what they brought him in for.
But I think he's worth. I mean, if you're going to sign a guy who you might as well see what he's got, especially theoretically a lob threat who's going to pair well with the guy you just traded, 3 rotation players and 2 starters for. Ben's a starter, whatever you want to call him, I don't really care. Good player, of course, but yeah. So I think we're kind of in lockstep on that. I don't know what I expect from Doc on that front. It feels like Millsap's going to get a pretty long run here too, just to kind of see what he can provide. And but it's one game. Of course, we're not going to make a mountain out of a molehill, but it didn't love the fit with Harden there. I mean, Harden set him up for some good shots. He had that one, I think it was the first half where like Harden drew 2 and he threw like a laser to Millsap, and Millsap had like about the worst layup attempt I've seen this year.
Yeah, it was bad.
Again, I love watching Paul Millsap's game when he was in his prime, but it was a tough layup. No shade, just speaking what I saw. So yeah, I think it's not ideal, and I think I don't know. I mean, that's kind of how I feel about it, and I feel like he's going to get run, and some of it's going to be deserved, but it's not the way to optimize Harden. But the fact of the matter might be, as we're kind of getting at, is he might just be the best option. But I would like to see Bassey get run.
I would just like to see options. That's my thing. It's like these last 25 games, once again, you experiment, you figure out who works with who, you plug in guys. If they don't work, you can kind of figure it out on the fly. But as we know, the Sixers are going to have multiple identities now. And that is something that they've never really had the benefit of when Joel Embiid sits, because they go from having the identity of being an NBA team to being a G League team when he sits. And now it's like this identity that you're molding around James Harden's game. And we all know, just historically speaking, Harden functions best with a rim running big. Mm-hmm. And if Bassey or Willie Cauley-Stein can fit that role, that's what we need to kind of see if they can, because there are going to be certain matchups where you just can't play Paul Millsap. There are going to be certain matchups where you're trying to switch him on to guys and he's getting absolutely burnt in space. There are going to be matchups where if his 3 isn't falling, he's not even providing any value as a floor spacer. And ultimately, he's probably not a big minute rotation player for a contender, at least in every single matchup. I think there might be matchups where you can do that. And like, if your goal is to take the big away from the paint and take him away from the rim, and Millsap is hitting 3s at a decent clip, that gives you an advantage. But that if that's not reliable, then we're going to need to be able to have those options and change our identity for different matchups. And that's something that the Sixers have not had before. And that's something that a lot of really good teams do have.
Yeah, and so a few points I want to just like briefly touch on. We're talking about like optimizing Harden. We're talking about like the version of Harden that is like carrying the load offensively, which is gonna be the case in the non-Joel. Right. Right? Obviously, Joel is arguably the best big man in the NBA. You can't really find a better like it would be awesome to watch Harden with Jokic, but yeah, I mean you can't really find a better fit than with the MVP. So that, and then we were talking about kind of this idea of like an all NBA caliber guard with Harden. Like we're talking about offense, obviously, like because Ben literally made an all-star game or an all NBA team. Excuse me. Like I was just thinking back to that earlier. And the other thing that I think is, and this is just totally like a nerdy fun thing, is people like worried about like, is Harden going to ruin like Joel's MVP chances, things like that, like because the plus minus and all that. Nerdy thing. Joel's EPM went up after yesterday's game because he was incredible.
That's all that matters.
So yeah, it's, obviously it's such like I feel it's such a blog boy for that. Anyone can roast me.
Hey, look, as long as the EPM's going up and it's not going down, that's all I care about. And you can bring it up there. All I've noticed is that Jokic at one point this season had was breaking the EPM charts. Like
he was like plus 11.5 or something like through like November.
It was like literally like you couldn't even see. They had the little thing. Chandler, who listens to the podcast, shout out to Chandler, tweeted that it was like off the screen, like you couldn't even see it. And now he's come down. He's still like probably going to end with like the highest EPM or whatever since they started.
He's plus 9 right now.
But like the gap is like Joel's like a plus 7.5 or something.
7.7 now. Yeah, it's his highest.
There we go. There we go. We love it. So
I'm a sicko for tracking that all year, but it's a good stat. Shout out to Dunks and Threes, Taylor Snar. If you have the money, definitely support it if you can. A lot of cool stuff there. But
yeah, I like that. I use Darko, LeBron, EPM, all those, and I will say that I think that the on-off stuff, the metrics have gotten smarter to the point where the on-off stuff isn't weighed as much as it used to be, which is like great. That's what we should be going for, because you can't just look at like we do this all the time. Like I heard it for years about DeMar DeRozan, and I was like, DeMar DeRozan's good. Sorry, I don't care what his on-offs are. And now we're finally seeing that this year when he's put in the right situation for him, because it's all contextual.
I also love EPM because I feel like it matches what I see on the floor. Obviously, I can only watch so much, but I just think when I go look at stuff there, I'm like, oh yeah, that track, like
having watched the Sixers, I agree. I look at it and I'm like, yeah, no, that Tobias is playing like that. Drummond's playing like that. Like throughout the year, I felt like of all the metrics, it definitely matches the eye test.
Shout out to Taylor Snar, does a bunch of really great work. Like I said, if you can subscribe and afford it, a lot of cool stats. He's doing great stuff there. If he wants to, I'm sure he's going to get snatched up by a team at some point. So consume his time.
Well, Sixers fans are probably going to be mad at him because his metric says Jokic is better. But let's be honest, they all do this year. So
it's tough to overcome the guy who's averaging 26, 12, and 8 on 66% true shooting. It's tough to.
And they have a G League. Once again, they have a G League bench. Like they might have the worst bench in the NBA.
Obviously, Monte's been great, and they have some other fun guys. But they've had some injuries. But but again, point being, if you're worried about Harden ruining Joel's advanced metrics, fear not. He is on the upswing after one game, so he might.
Let's go. One game sample size, baby. I'm checking it after every game, and if it goes down, then we're throwing that argument out the window.
Jokic by like March 15th. That's right. If he goes up by plus 0.3 every game, so maybe Harden.
But then it will be he has James Harden, who the entire media said wouldn't work with Joel Embiid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
not the entire media, but
Joel generally 34 on 72% true shooting last night. I think I said 80% earlier, which was obviously hyperbolic. But yeah, like you get 34 and 72% true shooting. Like no shit, you're gonna like be awesome, like and play the defense he did. It's how it works.
I was gonna say if there's one thing that we can look forward to, I think over the next few weeks, it is that Joel's defense almost has to be better. Like one of the things that people talked about was like, I still don't know if they have a championship level defense just because I have a ton of question marks about them. Joel can clean up a lot of messes, but like there could be the wrong matchup in the playoffs and blah, blah, blah. But losing Seth Curry and putting James Harden in there, offensively, Harden's going to carry more of a load. Defensively, if he is engaged as he was last night, is going to be better than Seth Curry.
Like the defense, like he had a few laps. I think he got beat by D'Lo on a drive and had like a play where he's kind of a no man's land on a corner three, but he had a play where like he contained a Jalen Noel drive off of a closeout, forced a pass and a travel. He was active as kind of a low man, just being well positioned. Like he was good. He was a positive defensive. Like he just was much better than he was in Brooklyn. Like I think like he was awful in Brooklyn. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I did a little Q&A with Matt Brooks, who does awesome work for covering the Nets from Nets Daily, and he was really justifiably harsh on Harden's defense. But and like as someone who's watched enough of his games in Brooklyn, like. He was good last night for his standards, and so that's a huge thing. And I think to the defensive point, like I think the Sixers can have a top 10. Like if they play like they did last night defensively, they can have a top 10 defense. You're always going to be good with Joel. I think that can kind of be two reductions at times, but it's the case. It's the truth. Like if Joel did last night, you're going to be pretty well positioned. The last point I wanted just to make is what I'm going to monitor is James Harden's rim frequency moving forward. Only had 3 shots in the paint last night, restricted area, excuse me. Had 2 more in the paint. So rim frequency is about 25%. Obviously, it helped that he was cooking from 3, 5, 7, but something I'm going to monitor. I know his rim frequency has been fine this year on the overall, but it's been the efficiency there.
The finishing numbers have not been great. Yeah,
he was only 1 of 3 in the restricted area last night. I keep using paint and restricted area interchangeably, but that's not correct. 3 shots in their restricted area, which I believe would clean the glass. I think cleaning the glass is within 4 feet is what they define as a rim shot. So something we're going to monitor. Again, I'm not too worried after one game because Harden was brilliant from 3 and was drawing fouls and
also early wasn't even looking to get downhill.
Yeah,
it wasn't really until like the second or third quarter that he even had those opportunities.
His first paint touch, I believe, was the N1 where he drove on Anthony Edwards and got the N1. So
right.
Something I'm just going to keep in mind, see what it's like. Kind of track the finishing as well. It's wonderful that cleaning the glass differentiates between his Nets tenure and his Sixer tenure, so we can see all those things differently. So obviously, cleaning the glass is on the subscription-based site. But I tweet this about all the time. So if Sixers fans want to check it out, more than happy to share that. Obviously, you can DM me too if you're curious about things. So just the last note I wanted to touch on there. Again, just something to monitor. Everything here is basically just stuff to monitor. You can't be too concrete about anything beyond the fact the Sixers are going to be a better team with James Harden.
They're never going to lose again. That's what the title of this episode is. The Sixers will never...
and Joel Embiid is better than Michael Jordan. Those are the 2 key takeaways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and if they lose to the Knicks on Sunday, it's not my fault. It's your fault. So I just want to say I have an ongoing curse. So maybe I shouldn't name the episode this, but I will say it was great talking with you. And once again, follow Jackson. I'll put his links in the description so you can follow him on Twitter and all of his work. And I really appreciate you coming on, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. It is funny the thing about the Knicks thing. Like, remember when the Sixers got their ass kicked by the Knicks in like Game 3? Like,
it feels like 2 years ago.
It feels like a lifetime, but it is hilarious. And the Knicks have struggled this year. The Sixers have been great, even before the Heart. Great, relatively.
That was literally. You want to talk about the Trill Bro dude curse? I said. Before that game, the podcast before that game, my hot take was Kemba's washed. And then Kemba came out and fucking cooked us for like the whole game. And I was like, well, this is karma for me. And, I hope he isn't. Kemba's one of my favorite players. It wasn't a slight at him, but that was one of the things is like, he might just be past his time. And now he's done for the year. And like the Knicks have kind of stumbled lately and like, we'll see. It's, once the Sixers get something good happening to them, I try not to be like too excited about it, even though I just spent an hour and a half gushing over this shit. But I just want to say the Knicks series feels like a trap to me. So just being a general pessimist as a Sixers fan, but I also felt that way about last night. And then I saw James Harden play for us, and now everything's good, and we'll never lose again. So
there you go. Yeah, never lose again. Joel Embiid greater than Michael Jordan. That's the most important takeaways from today's podcast.
That's right. All right. Peace, dude. Appreciate it.
Yeah.